how do you get to understand it a whole lot better? My approach is to make fear your friend, to welcome it in and start to have a conversation with it. If that sounds a little bit vague, let me take you through an example which shows you the sort of thing that I've done with it. And this is an example from my own past. It's some years ago when I was a commercial director in a big business. Now, I had something itching at me that I wanted to do, and it was to bring the other commercial directors together as a networking group for drinks in the evening, to get to know each other a bit better and to share information. And it's the sort of thing that I didn't have to do, and that so easily I could be prevented from my fear from doing. So that's kind of how we see fear. It pops up and it stops us from doing something we have an interest in. So what I did was send the email out, encouraging people to come along, set the date and the bar. And when the evening came, it was really interesting to observe what things were coming up for me, because I was actually becoming paranoid that no one would turn up. That's kind of where the texture of this thing was lying. So I grabbed hold of a colleague in the office and forced them to come with me. And we sat there in the bar, I ordered a bottle of wine, sat there in the bar for about an hour. And I found it very difficult to concentrate on the conversation, because I was mostly interested in why had others not turned up, why was no one there. And eventually someone did, and we had a good conversation. Fortunately, they were a keen supporter. And I noticed after the event, I could have been quite negative about the whole thing. I could have sort of put a realistic even spin on it, that only 3 of us turned up. But I put a very positive spin on it, as I think you often have to. Said that it was highly successful. Lots of people turned up. We had a great discussion. And I put a second email out to do it again. And as that built up, I interrogated my fear. What's really going on for me here? And I saw that it was actually just a question of being left alone. It was a question of abandonment. It wasn't about doing this sort of thing at all. It wasn't holding events or reaching out. It was just the fact that when I did, the possibility that people wouldn't turn up, and it was being there alone. So the next event, I just went down to the bar and I ordered a bottle of wine, and I must have sat there for about an hour before anyone else turned up. And then one person turned up, and then a couple of people turned up, and then another person eventually turned up. And there was something there for me in the time that I spent committed to doing this thing on my own with that bottle, that was, formative about accepting that there was a risk here. There was a fear of abandonment, and I had to work with it. I had to sit there with this bottle and I had to kind of face it. And from it, I learnt that facing my fear of that nobody turning up and abandonment was the key thing. And then if I worked through that commitment and showed my commitment to face it, then other people would feel more relaxed about the event. I realised that I could let it go, and I was freer in my conversations. The event carried on running. I found that it often takes hard work to push through those first few runnings of an event, to just keep it going regularly. But as I talked to people, I understood more about their fears, weirdly, that stopped them from coming. And I rationalised and I understood my fear much better, because I could see what they were telling me as the reasons why they wouldn't turn up and how they were concerned about would anyone else be there. And somehow that made me feel a lot better. But it was through interrogating my fear and seeing it there and working with it that I got to understand that my fear wasn't pushing out and doing creative things or speaking or holding the space or anything like that. It was purely the fact of whether people would turn up, and that I could partner with this fear and just sit there literally with it and the bottle, and it would kind of dissipate. And fear is like that. Fear hides in the vagueness. It's a bit like a sort of woo ghost of a white sheet. If you allow fear to be vague and spectral, it kind of tends to have more of a monster power over us. And you find once you approach it, the shape becomes clear. It's almost like the the ghost becomes a human form, and then you start to see the texture of its skin and its thinking and the way it reacts, and it becomes human as we walk towards it. But the danger is that because we're scared, we don't often do that. So the other thing I noticed was that we can often think that our fear is actually what's become a strategy to avoid the fear. So, for example, for me, I might have thought my fear was in holding these events or doing this sort of thing or something like that. But by interrogating it and getting closer to it and understanding it, I saw that my actual fear was just people wouldn't turn up. It was the sort of abandonment factor that was actually my fear. And once I understood that, I could work with it. So very important to understand the difference between your fear itself, it's kind of deep down below everything, and what might be your strategy for avoiding that fear, which are different things. And if you don't understand what your fear really is, it's very difficult to work with it. So it's a good exercise, if you can, to talk this over perhaps with a friend. You might share your fears. It's much better to get this stuff outside your head and get somebody to interrogate you about what your fears are than try and do it all inside your head. Good thing is to ask, well, if your fear is going outside the house, ask your friend or ask yourself, well, what happens when you go outside the house? What are you scared will happen when you do that? And then when they say, well, I might meet people, you say to them, well, when you meet people, what are you scared of will happen? What's likely to happen then? And they say, well, they might ask me questions I don't know the answer to. And you can see through this process of asking what's going to happen then, that you tend to dig down as to what the fear is. So that's what you do with making fear your friend. You learn from it, you interrogate it, you get closer to it. And it's weird because it's like in The Godfather, Michael Corleone says, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. And there's something here, if we really want to understand the difficulties and threats and monsters in our lives, if we pull them even closer than our friends and we interrogate them, then we're going to understand what they are, we're going to get texture on them, we're going to increase our learning, and we're going to build our capacity to go towards them and to grow through these difficulties. And it's weird because I've learned it's only by engaging with them and taking them on and working through them, rather than letting us pin us to the wall, literally, oh my God, this thing is pinning me to the wall. If we engage with them, move forward with them, and we work through with them, yes, we feel uncomfortable, we take the challenge. There's nothing wrong with that feeling of discomfort. But that discomfort is a positive sign that you're moving into a zone of learning and growth, where when you deal with this thing and you take it on, your confidence will grow as a result, because the next time this comes and you have that feeling, you'll know, I worked through it before and it was okay. It worked for me. I learned from it, and I'm going to continue on this journey through, and I'm going to learn from it. So make fear your friend, interrogate it, ask it questions. And if you'd like to ask me to help you unpack your fears, by all means, get in touch. Thank you.